Hello everyone, how are you? And welcome to episode 2 of the ups and downs for Star Trek Starfleet Academy. I really hope that you enjoyed episode 1. I hope that you enjoyed our ups and downs for episode 1. And just thank you everyone so far who is giving this show a chance. It is so exciting to have new Star Trek to talk about. Everything is pretty much blank slate, even with the stuff that's coming over from other shows. It's been a hoot. I guess I'm just going to jump straight into it because make sure you check out our ups and downs for episode 1, which is on the channel already. But yeah, let's have a look at all of the ups and downs for Star Trek Starfleet Academy Season 1, Episode 2, Beta Test. The USS Athena is now back in San Francisco and they have landed at the campus that's just beside that Golden Gate Bridge there. I'm going to talk about that in the cetacean observation, so make sure that you stick around for that. And also, speaking of cetacean observations, yeah, it's fall semester, or autumn for some of us, in Starfleet Academy, and we open up with a speech from Nala Aki, as she is talking about the little things, the acts of service that can make your fellow cadets' lives a bit easier. Things like making your bed, which is probably a lesson all of us can take in real life. I'm saying this as I know full well my bed is unmade in the next room. There's a couple of parts of this episode where I felt a bit called out, I'm not gonna lie. Another one was get to class on time. Is this a direct attack against me? I try, all right? I try. We get that great scene of Nala standing on that podium, and behind her you've got Admiral Vance, you've got the Doctor, you've got Laura Thock, and we have a new character, Chancellor Kelrek, who is Nala Aki's counterpart for the War College. We get a little bit more about the War College in this episode because it was only sort of name dropped really in the previous episode. Straight away, we jump into a sort of everyday life at the Academy. We have our xenobiology class, which is being taught by the Doctor. And we get something that is most definitely Chekhov's goo, because, yeah, this thing gets on you, it's going to replicate and it's going to take over you, and then you're going to have to spend holidays with its parents. It's silly, but it's an up from me. I love as well that, you know, if everything goes completely awry, you get a C in this class. And Sam goes, that's a C, how do we fail? And the Doctor just goes, well, if it kills you, I guess. Welcome to Starfleet Academy. There's a moment in this as well where Caleb seems to have possibly a lab partner, or at the very least, someone standing beside him who's wearing glasses. Oh my goodness, cancel the show. Somebody in the 32nd century wearing glasses? Egads, I tell you, egads. Well, possibly Caleb feels that way because this student is very excited. They might be able to play with furungal horned tapeworms next semester, to which Caleb says, please never stand next to me again. Caleb, lighten up. Lighten up, all right? You're in school now. Turn that frown upside down. Caleb doesn't seem to be having the best day because he goes from xenobiology to xenomythology, which is being taught by a Vulcan instructor. There's a bit of a banter here in the beginning which sort of stands out, and that's Darum who leans forward and says, is there a myth about a student who endangers the entire ship by trying to call his mummy down? That's a not very nice thing to say, Darum. I made the point in episode 1 that I do quite like Darum, but I realise I've given him a few downs at this point because I think the first impressions of Darum are sort of leaving a bit of a bad taste in the mouth. Now, sort of, you know, as this episode goes on a little bit, you start to see a tiny bit of, you saw Darum kind of, you know, bigging up Jaden in the last episode as well. And that's what I want to see more of. We get probably one of the best examples of this being high school drama, I think comes from this episode. Because you see this in the classroom. You know, Darum, you know, slagging off Caleb and Caleb slagging Darum back with kind of a bit of a racist comeback. He's like, you know, oh, well, he's just overcompensating because of his tiny fish. Is that not like super racist? I'm giving that one a down. or specious at least. And there's a few examples of that in this episode that I feel that the people who worry that this is going to be teen-centric, YA, sort of Riverdale type of stuff, are probably going to come out of this episode going, oh, all of our fears were confirmed. I am here to say, I see it. I'm going to be calling it out as I go along. It's also not the only thing that this episode does. But yeah, I'm also not going to pretend it's not there. I like the instructor's clapback when he observes the students doing this and he goes, many cultures would send males of your age out into the wild to die alone. Thankfully, we are not one of those cultures. Currently. Up! If that wasn't a straighten up, or I'm going to sort you out from that Vulcan, I don't know what is. Meanwhile, we're sort of still intercutting with Captain Aki's speech, and she says once again, you are the first corps of officer level cadets to return to this campus in 120 years. Okay, so we're going to do a calendar watch here. We reckon that, this is in 3191, because there was a star date given in episode 1, which was when Caleb was 6, 15 years later, 21. There we go, works out to 3191. That would make it concurrent with season 5 of Star Trek Discovery. And if we think of Star Trek Discovery as well, we know that the 4th season of Discovery opened with Burnham giving a commencement speech to a class of cadets. Those cadets were on the USS Federation, the Pax class ship. There is a key phrasing here, to return to this campus, because we know that Earth rejoined the Federation at the end of the 4th season of Star Trek Discovery. So the earliest that this show could take place is around the time of Red Directive. This could be running at the same time. This could be just the same year. Perhaps the events of Discovery have already happened. And Discovery got a name check in episode 1. It was undergoing a retrofit, so of course it couldn't help. It's what happens when you give something a magic propulsion system. You have to explain why it's not there. Yeah, listen, I'm joking because Doctor Who has to do that every week. Why doesn't the Doctor show up? Because reasons. Best we can kind of assume it's running concurrent with season 5, which means perhaps we'll see evidence as this season goes on of the big mystery that Discovery's checking out, and also keep an eye out for the Breen, especially if you're going near the Badlands. Or, yeah, as I say, perhaps when Saru and Tarina get married, that's happening at the same time as this commencement speech for Starfleet Academy. One of the great things about being back on campus is Boothby Memorial Park. Now, obviously, I'll cover a good deal on the X, but that's straight away, that's it up. That's it. That was just a nice little touch right there. So, Laura Thock, I'm really, really digging Laura Thock. Laura Thock is taking the militarism to the extreme. She does point out that although these cadets are not in the War College, that is not to say that they won't learn how to conduct themselves in times of combat and in physical fitness. It is raining hard outside. All of the cadets are there in the sort of tactical armor that we saw introduced in Discovery. And she is walking from person to person, shouting in their faces, talking about her lineage. Her Jem'Hadar father taught her that victory is life, whereas her Klingon mother taught her that today is a good day to die. And she singles out one student, shouting in their face, who turns and runs away. And she laughs and goes, I can always spot the runners. I want to give an up to Gina Yachere's performance in this scene, because she is undoubtedly a lot of fun. But I'm also going to give a down. It's a bit hammy. It's like, I'm going to pick one student and make their day hell. And perhaps that is perfectly normal teaching methods. I'm just like, maybe let's not do that around like day 1 or 2. So yeah, the poor student. Basically, I think the point there is that, I know it's only the start of episode 2, but the humor's still finding its feet a little bit. One thing I love, though, is that this whole sequence comes to an end with the official opening of Starfleet Academy, where you got those fireworks outside in the shape of a delta. Up. Okay, now we have the opening credits sequence. I'm in two minds about this one. I quite like the visuals. You know, I love the theme, obviously, growing. You grow from a seed. We have this idea of cherry blossoms floating down the hallways of Academy. I dig that. And then you have as well this rebuilding of the Academy. And myself and Chris, we were talking like, is this more symbolic? Now, this clearly is a different type of campus to what we've seen before, you know, in fairness, 1,000 years ago in things like Picard, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and even that simulation in Voyager. Yeah, I suppose, did they have to raise it to the ground? But then 1,000 years have gone by. What happened to Starfleet Academy? And then we got to thinking, it's like that scene in the first episode of Futurama where Fry goes into the cryogenic chamber and then outside the window you see aliens come by and destroy New York. And then New York is rebuilt. And aliens come back and destroy it again. Got me thinking about that. So yes, they're kind of building from zero. I've got to be honest. It's not that I don't like the theme tune. I don't hear a theme tune. Am I mad? Is it just me? You know, the music sort of around the opening credits, I quite like what we're hearing in the show. We talked about it last week, I feel like I'm on Drag Race yesterday, where, you know, we're hearing stuff that's very evocative of kind of the Picard era music. There's lovely, lovely stuff. But I've watched a couple of episodes now and I couldn't hum the theme to save my life. Is that just me? So I'm sorry, but I must give that a down. Call it personal taste. I like a theme that I can hum. And Jeff Russo has written some really nice theme tunes for Star Trek already. Maybe watch this space. What we will do, however, is we were both, myself and Chris, chatting, going, up that closing few bars of the opening credits where you get that big reveal of the Athena sitting there in San Francisco. Very evocative, we feel, of Ilea's theme from the motion picture. That sort of, you know, block chords on the piano just as it rings it out. That was an up for me. I enjoyed that. I had a chance to watch this episode before Ellie did, right? We text Ellie going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But we wouldn't tell her why. Having a Breaker up who is visually identical to Rok-Tahk from Star Trek Prodigy here in the opening of this sequence was a definite up. Now, for two reasons. One, Breaker, cool. But two is that with all of the kerfuffle about what happened with Star Trek Prodigy, it's off Paramount Plus, you can't stream it there, you know, it went to Netflix, now it's off Netflix, now you can only get it in physical media. We were a bit like, well, are we ever going to talk about it? Then we have that great thing in the episode 1 where Dal and Murph and Gwendala all get name dropped, and then on the wall there's more examples as well. But here, there's an actual Breaker. Now, they were originally introduced in beta canon, but of course visually introduced in Lost and Found, the opening episode of Star Trek Prodigy. Now, if I'm going to nitpick, and that's what I do, well, not always, I do it with love though. It does look like, I'll be honest, they lifted Rok-Tahk from an episode of Prodigy and deposited her into this episode visually. Because why is this Breaker only wearing, for example, the overalls that we saw Rok-Tahk wearing in pretty much the first season of Star Trek Prodigy, when we know she wore a uniform when she got to the Academy? Do you know what I mean? So it kind of feels like, did you have the file for Rok-Tahk there and you just used it there? And I'm sure it wasn't that case at all. Now, that might be nitpicky, but we've seen a Breaker wear a Starfleet uniform. And just one last point on this. Like when I say I want to see a live action Breaker as well, I am aware of the fact that I myself am not the proportions of a Breaker, so I don't know how I would do that. But we were chatting going like, is Star Trek still a bit spooked after William Shatner's rock monsters that never were from Star Trek V? You never know. Already we're seeing the friendship groups forming. Sam is talking to Caleb, Jayden is there, Genesis arrives. It's time for room assignments. I think everyone in the known world saw this one coming. Although Genesis teases that, oh, is she going to be bunking up with Caleb? No. And on that point, she also says, make sure you don't hook up with anyone for at least the first 6 months. That's how you really get to know how crazy some people are. Well, do you know what? Good advice, Genesis. But no, they're not in the same room because Kato's about to turn and enter his room. But before he does, keep an eye out for the Kelpian student who turns up quite a lot in these first 2 episodes. but particularly here because they're quite noticeable for doing what we're calling the Saru walk. Behind them as they walk down the hallway, they sit down and chat to another student who then stands up and walks away. And unfortunately, because the Kelpian is so noticeable and stands out, it brought our attention to a continuity error. We see the Kelpian come in, sit down, the student stands up and walks away, and then we turn around and we're seeing another angle of Genesis talking to Caleb, and we see that same student stand up and walk away again. The problem is that when you have something so visually capturing, it's like, oh yeah, okay, no, oh no, I see you. Also, the Kelpian is currently unnamed, so we've decided to call them Samson. If it's Sukal, we've got a problem, so I really hope it's Samson. So for all of the love that I'm showering on this Kelpian, down for being so visually cool, we notice the continuity error. Caleb opens the door, and of course, the only person who was going to be on the other side of the door is sitting there lifting weights. It's Darum. We all knew it was coming. Considering Darum was, I think, the only one who wasn't walking down the hallway with Caleb at this point. And this one is... I dig it. Alright, because I'm a sucker for kind of an odd couple thing. But I get that they're pushing this rivalry hard. You might even say it's a heated rivalry. But they really are pushing this. Once this brings us from oh, hell no. Chris rang me and said the same thing. It's like, oh, hell no. Word for word, I promise you. Yeah, just this idea of bunking them up together, and they're going to be fighting the whole time. You've got one is extreme discipline, one is extremely loosey-goosey. Is it a trope we've seen 150 times before? Yes, of course it is. For me, because I'm a fan of this odd couple setup, it isn't up for me, but I hear the fact that it's like, I kind of miss Boimler and Rutherford who just like each other, even though you still have an odd couple set up there as well. Cutting back to the adults for a moment, the Doctor is talking to, or at least trying to talk to Captain Aki. She is in a turbolift, the two of them, with Laura Thok and an exocomp. I'll talk about the exocomp in station observations as well, right? The Doctor keeps trying to talk to Nala. Nala keeps shifting away because there's chairs in this turbo lift, which is a pleasant upgrade. And I really like this. We don't need to see the inside of the turbo shaft. And what I mean by that is, for the last few years, we've had the money to show off and do all the CGI stuff, which means, we then get cavernous type turbo shafts, and then there's the TARDIS. That was season 3 of Discovery. Whereas we didn't really do that beforehand. It's like it was a lift. And I like that. They seem to be getting back to that, and you can see they're clearly changing through the floors as well. So, yeah, I enjoy this. And also I enjoy this exchange where Nala's like, I hear you, Doctor, but I would give anything to end this conversation right now. Part of what they're discussing is where the new seat of the Federation will be built. The new headquarters. There's options like Namibia, Singapore, and even Paris, where it had always stood before. They exit the turbolift as they discuss the Beta Z delegation that's coming for some negotiations. And guess who's outside the turbolift? It's Samson again. I'm telling you, keep an eye on that Kelpian. They're everywhere. We got a great visual gag in the fact that, yes, Captain Aki knows the names of the dots as they float by. Carl, Stanley, Miranda, up. Aki and Thok enter Aki's quarters, and Darum and Caleb are already there. Now, as they walk in, Darum jumps to attention very quickly, and, Caleb has to be reminded to jump to attention. And they are saying, no, we can't room together, and it's just ridiculous. And I say, Darum gets a line that made me smile. Not my fault to grow up without socks, or aim, or balls. It's dumb. But Caleb did get that racist quote in earlier on, so I'm giving Darum an up for that. Nala looks at them and says, well, you have something in common already. They're funny. Aren't they funny, she says to Thok. Thok goes, is this multiple choice? I love Laura Thok in this scene. She is an up for me. The request to not room together is denied flat out. Darum leaves the room. Caleb remains behind, and we get something that, on first watch, made me a little bit concerned, was... are we going to have several episodes of Caleb just being an ass? This scene is one of the reasons I was worried about that, because he's hanging out of a lamp, and we do get that really good comedy of, Lorathok not saying a word, but mouthing, like eyeballing Caleb, and Caleb's like, okay, maybe we won't mess with Lorathok. But then we also get, you've hacked the exits 3 times in the last 12 hours. Well, you told me to get hobbies. I'm giving it a down. And the reason I'm giving it a down is not because, there's a rebellious streak or whatever, but we closed out the last episode with the agreement that he would stick around, that he would give things a chance, and that he would trust Captain Aki. And straight away, by the sounds of it, what he did is he walked out of her office and went straight to hack the exits. So for me, that's a bit like you're saying one thing and you're doing another, and it's kind of jarring. They talk about Goja 5, the planet that we now know Anisha was on, his mother, before she, escaped, before she disappeared, before she got away. And unfortunately, it seems that Goja 5 doesn't exist in the Federation database. And as we know, if it's not in the database, your planet doesn't exist. On the one hand, I would say, even by the 32nd century, galaxy's a big place. And, remember, we've spent about 100 years not being able to travel very far in that galaxy as well. So that itself is not massively shocking, that there's an uncharted world, at least. But it's sort of hard to root for Caleb in this scene. He's dismissed, and, the first thing Lorathok says is he really needs his arse kicked. Which is funny, and I get that, and I enjoy the inclusion. Now, in fairness, Nala also says, well, he spent his life having his arse kicked. That's part of it. So, we're doing a scene change. And the scene change is we're going to spend some time with Commander Kelrek, the head of the War College, and Admiral Vance, and a barefoot Nala Aki. I like the barefoot thing. And you can lay the reason for the bare feet at the feet of Alex Kurtzman. He took credit for that one and said, yeah, just decided to make her a bit quirky. I do like the yin and the yang of Nala and Kelrek. Kelrek is very sort of prim and proper, and we don't walk around barefoot. As he said, it's a health hazard. And she just says, actually, it's good for the circulatory system, and sometimes it's good just to let the little piggies out. I'm going to say up for those of, that's all for the people in the audience who enjoy the little piggies, and that's fine. I like Kelrek. I do. I think people were hoping maybe for more of a kind of a stronger counterpart to Nala. Not that I want them to fight. Basically, I think what we were hoping for is the sort of the Picard Jellicoe. You know what I mean? We were hoping for more of a type Jellicoe, 4-shift rotation Jellicoe type commander. And instead of Jellicoe, we get Arnold Rimmer. To the younger people in the audience, that was a character from a show called Red Dwarf. And I get that. As I say, I do like Kelrek, but right now he's a bit of a dweeb. And as they're walking away, they're discussing the Betazoid delegation. They're, Beta Z leaving the Federation. That was a blow. Bringing them back would bring 30 or 40 worlds, 90 light years of safe trading space, more people loyal to the Federation. There's sincerely a good reason to get Beta Z back into the Federation. And we also learned that when the burn happened, the Federation effectively failed them. So they went isolationist. They put a psionic barrier around their space that nobody could get through or even communicate through. And it's only in the last few years that they've been able to make contact with the current head of the Beta Z government, a leader called Sedal, who himself is an isolationist. So Vance is very concerned that, we need to put our best foot forward. We need to get him on side, because otherwise what will happen is that Sedal will arrive with this delegation, say no, and then go back and finish out his 10-year term before they can try again. It's a bit funny when he says, look, in front of the Betazoids, we're one happy family, all right? I wouldn't try lying to an empath. This whole sequence, though, has some gems. Nala Aki going to Kelrek, if you want to talk the good old days, I've got more of them than you. That was an up, half lanthanite. The depiction of Kelrek as someone who, we wondered, did he get the job on merit, or did someone get the job for him? Is he a bit of a John Harriman? Did Mummy and Daddy get him the job as head of the War College? Or was it a case of, not the most qualified man for the job, the only man for the job? We know that the Federation has been running at a reduced capacity for a long time. Maybe there's been a case of, well, I'm the king of the castle, and suddenly here comes along this space hippie who's bare feet, listens to the Grateful Dead, and knows a lot more than he does. I can understand them each getting their backs up over this. I like this. In a short space of time, you do see how they are opposites, but they're obviously working together as well. The one thing on where they are separate is that Kelrek thinks that the cadets should not be in attendance at the delegation and negotiations with the Betazoids, whereas Aki couldn't disagree more, because she raises the point that it's the youth who are the ambassadors for the futures. Hello, the entire ethos of Starfleet Academy, but also there's a really interesting point here that I was talking to Chris about, and it's this idea that is very much prevalent in society today, where the older generation make these massive decisions about a world that they are going to spend less time in than the youth. And you see that here in the Betazoid delegation, because we have Sadal, who is probably older than 20 years old, alongside the younger characters who we're introduced to, like Trima and Occam. I thought it was such an interesting, Chris used the example of, people like Linda McMahon saying, we're gonna have A1 technology in every single schoolroom. I'm like, how about you link in with younger people and you get their opinions and you see what their feelings are on these situations? And that is something I believe that this episode is really trying to put across. As much as the grown-ups have their ideas on how things should be run, it's the younger ones who are going to have to live with those decisions. We cut to Jet Reno's classroom. Up. Tig Notaro's great. She's really, really good in Academy. I think she just suits this show so well. And this instructor role, she's there, she's speaking to the students, she singles out Sam, who has a face of somebody who's dying to be singled out, and, she is walking around dealing with... I like her. I don't like the humour of, we have the Tricom badge swallowing girl back again, and she's now quite rude to Sam, calling her an energy sponge. Down, and don't you ever speak to my Sam like that again. Now, she does have a moment of, not redemption, but like, where I kind of felt bad for her now in a few seconds. But what we also have in this scene is, again, it's a run on from earlier on, is Caleb just being a twat in this scene. Oh, there's nothing you can't teach me. I know it all already. Just let me get on with things. And I love that Reno just puts him on the spot. She says, all right then, get up there and teach the class. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, no, I'm joking. Come up and teach the class. And she says, who are you? And he goes, oh, I'm Caleb Meir. She says, you're going to have to speak at a human level. I'm Caleb Meir. And she goes, I didn't ask you your name. I asked who you were. And then she turns around and says, do you know this cadet's name? And he is shamed because he obviously didn't bother to learn any other names. And although it's at Caleb's expense, he brought it on himself. He needs a bit of a shaming. Also, I have to say, up to the shout out for both Oscar Wilde and the very true fact that, yes, Oscar Wilde, a good Irishman, his grave is covered in a glass barrier because people kept trying to kiss it. That's true. I love these random little facts. Anyway, as they're walking out, Caleb gets the goo spilled on him. The goo starts to replicate, and suddenly a holographic medical technician arrives and sprays him down with snot and wishes him a nice day, and Caleb storms out in a huff, and he needed this. He needed a moment of just having his ego slapped around a little bit. Because Caleb, mate, I love you, but I'm trying to like you, and at this point, it's a bit difficult. He storms out and he storms into the grounds. That same medical hologram pops up, and he kind of breaks her. He says, right, list every coffee order that's ever happened using the Fibonacci sequence, and he overloads her processing thing. Like, are holograms sentient? Like, is that not torture? What if he did that to the doctor? Down. Also, so he starts climbing the fence to get away. He's like, this is my latest strop. Takes off his jacket, throws it on the ground, and he's climbing the fence to get out. And we are introduced to Zoe Steiner's Trima. Taken up. I really like Trima in this episode because she is presented straight away as someone who is honest. And she's fun, and she's there to have fun, and she is enjoyable and nice, and I like her. She teases him. He's like, I'm not sure if we're going to say it. And she goes, you're literally on the fence. And I'm glad we did it because I literally have written down here in block capitals, he's on the fence. Do you get it? but we hang a lampshade on it, so all right, I'm gonna allow that one. And there's definitely a bit of flirting going on. There was one thing I did notice. Trima's eyes are brown. And as the episode went on, I had a look at Sidal's eyes, Occam's eyes, and none of whom have the black kind of pupils, irises that Betazoids have. So this could be a continuity error, or it's been 1,000 years. You know, has there just been a change? I will say, it's not addressed, so it could be a stylistic choice. It is something I would like to see even mentioned as we go on, because if you go back to Deanna Troi, black eyes there around the white, and then when Lwaxana Troi comes in, same thing, using contact lenses. And there was an interview with Marina Sirtis where she discussed being brought back for Nepenthe in Picard season 1, and you know, she was like, you know, I wore a wig and black contacts in Nemesis, right? Like, I have to wear those again. And thankfully, she had them. So it's as recent as Picard. The black eyes are there. So yeah, I'm wondering if there's a reason for the change, or if it's just a case of these people all have lovely eyes and we don't want to cover them. Trima leaves, and then Caleb goes to follow her, but he can't because the security guards beam in and say, "Where are you going, Caleb? What are you doing out of grounds?" And he tries to escape by going, "Look, there's a Borg!" And they jump on him, and it's visual comedy, and it's an up from me. It's silly, but it's my kind of silly. Hi, I'm Duncan Rillick, no relation, and I collect relics from before the burn. Thanks to a temporal wormhole, I now have an unlimited supply of TrekCulture t-shirts, and I'm selling them to you! You could be wearing this stylish down and up t-shirt. Or, how about this fish watching design? Bright yellow on black. The colors I'd use in thumbnails, I tell you that for nothing. I plan to take these designs and transfer them via quantum duplication onto hats, mugs, and posters. So look out for those. Ah! Treat this unlimited supply as a limited time deal. Get your t-shirt quick. Who's your daddy? The Betazoid delegation arrives and the negotiations begin. I like the fact that Vance opens with, "We failed you." There's no bells or whistles on it. He goes, "Here's the truth, the Federation let you down after the burn. You know, you were abandoned and you had to become self-sufficient." And Sidal doesn't do anything to disagree with that assessment either. Sidal is played by the deaf actor Anthony Natale or Natal. I like that they've obviously kind of in their heads gone, you know, what are other big negotiation episodes of Star Trek? Well, Next Generation Season 2, Loud as a Whisper, where you had Riga, who was deaf as well, and used that chorus to communicate vocally. Here, there's a device on Sidal's throat that allows us to hear Peter Michael's voice, who then, that's the voice you're hearing for the episode. I like as well that he then signs with Trima and Occam. It's just a nice little kind of continuity with earlier negotiations, but also these are an empathic race. Speech probably wouldn't be as important to them between themselves as it would be to other races. Now, that said, he comes in with some hardline asks. He wants, you know, grant, if we were considered joining the Federation, I want 12 battle-ready starships within 5 light years at all times. I want 6 seats on the council, and I want full veto powers without consensus. Look at the younger ones' reactions to this. They're not on board with what Sidal is asking. Sidal is being unreasonable here. You know, and even Vance says, "Okay, maybe we'll take a break now for a moment," because there's just no way that's going to happen. Not like that. And Sidal's reasoning for asking that is, okay, we'll come back to that. But yeah, it's like straight away you can see, you know, particularly Trima and Occam like, "Is that for real? Huh?" And I like that. That's an up. Because remember, it's the younger ones who have to live in this new era. On our break, you know, Sidal speaks briefly to Vance and Captain Aki, you know, where the Trima then says, perhaps we'd like a tour of the facility. And she turns around and points straight at Caleb, who is apparently trying to drink from the fountain. And I don't mean a water fountain, I mean like, the fountain in the pond. It says, I want him to be our tour guide. You can see Nala's face like, for real? She's like, yep, him. This is the same person who was brought in halfway through the negotiations in a top covered in snot, starts playing with his zipper to annoy people. And I do like the fact that, and Caleb is being brought down a bit by bit. He's being made a fool of, but I think it's important for his character to be foolish. He needs that because he's as serious as a seizure. At this point in time, Caleb does nothing for free, so he tries to negotiate with Nala about, yeah, I'll do the tour, but I want 50 hours off my menial labor, and, well, this couch is ugly, so you should just give it to me for my quarters. To which she corrects him, it's a chaise. And, she is right. But then he takes a bite out of the apple, which is not an apple, it's a Verulian fire fruit, and he nearly dies. And the dot through the window is breaking its heart laughing at him. That is an up. Again, foolish Caleb. To which he's like, what is that? And she's like, oh, I burned off any nerve endings I had like 300 years ago. I do like that he tosses it in the bin, and the bin plays the little TOS theme. Up. But she gets serious and says, look, Caleb, people are going to live and die based on what happens here today. And that sobers him up fairly quickly. So yes, he agrees then to be tour guide to Trima. They head toward the Gideon S. Turner wing. So we had a look at this one, right? And this seems to be an invented character because they themselves begin to have fun coming up with a story as to who Gideon S. Turner was. I was looking at Gideon S. And the first Gideon is, I'm thinking the Mark of Gideon, the original series. That itself is a biblical reference. But then there's Gideon Satek, who was in DS9's Second Sight. He's the one who reignited the star. He was played by Richard Kiley. The Turner bit doesn't seem to add to either of them. So maybe it's all of these things, maybe it's none of these things. I do like returning Stephen Colbert as the digital dean, telling people, head toward the Repli Cafe, where you can have a complimentary espresso, I'll come to that in a second, and we're now serving Rac de Gino, Copla. All of that is an up. Right, complimentary. We know that the Federation doesn't use money. There's many, many jokes about it throughout all of Star Trek, except for all of the times that it does use money. It's sort of an ongoing gag. But I was thinking, so we're 1,000 years on, but this post-burn version of the Federation, we're not really post-scarcity anymore. Yes, we still have replicator technology, but also for 120 years, the Federation was massively reduced in resources. What if it did return to a barter-type society? That, to me, is not that fantastical to consider. When you don't have, as much dilithium as you like to get from A to B to C, which will then bring you, perhaps the stuff you need for replicators and things like that. Yeah, I would now be interested to see if this is a federation that does have a monetary way of doing business. And, at this point, there's so many Ferengi at the Academy anyway, there probably is money there too. All of this, of course, taking place in James T. Kirk Pavilion. I wonder how many things are named after Kirk. Probably at least a rock or two. Trima and Caleb go outside where it's a bit of a meet cute. They talk about she is really excited to see humpback whales, but specifically because she wants to see a life form that's so big that your problems don't matter to it. It's just ticking along, doing its thing. And Caleb, picking up on this, says one of the things about whales is whales aren't lost. They have the whole of the ocean to swim in. And she goes, are you lost, Caleb, or are you a whale? And we get, it's a kind of a cute thing as well, where they're walking along and then there's like a little, little mini wall that Caleb steps up on and does the balancing thing, something I think so many of us have done. We're like, look at me, I can climb on this thing. And yeah, it's all lovely. And then he notices she has something in her teeth. And she says, oh, is it food? Is it gum? Is it a gem? And he's like, yeah, it is. It's called the Eye of Maxia, and it's given to the first daughter of the first house, which means Trima outranks the Troys, because they were the fifth house of Beta Z. The Waxana was heir to the sacred chalice of Reeks, though, so, it's pretty good. Part of Caleb's acceptance of being a tour guide was access to stellar cartography. He goes in with Trima and confesses that he's looking for a planet that's missing. She decides to trust him and gives him access to Beta Z's star charts, on which we see Goja 5. And on Goja 5, there is a grand army of the Republic. Wrong franchise. You know, that is the last place we knew that Anisha Mir was. So we know it exists, and it's behind the psionic wall that Beta Z has put up. This is an exciting moment for Caleb, because at least now he's struck, if not pay dirt, then one of the first tangible proofs that he's on the road to finding his mother. There's a little moment here where they say, okay, well then, we'll do an exchange of knowledge. And, he says, there's a whole world outside your barrier. And she's like, I know. And he says, well, tell me something you don't know or shock me. And she goes, Beta Z has naked weddings. It does. They do a little bit of spot of curfew breaking. After we get a shot of Alcatraz as we fly up over San Francisco Bay, he takes her down to... Right, so the first thing I like is that we're going in to see some humpback whales. Obviously, look, I've got The Voyage Home ringing in my ears, but I do have to say, I have to give a down to this. That CGI is a bit dodgy. It's a little bit cartoonish, I'm afraid. But also in this as well, we're clearly back in Reno's room. We've just taken the chairs out. So this kind of modular room, which is being reused a couple of times, it's a bit obvious at this point. It's clearly the room in which they did xenobiology. It's clearly the room, not xenobiology, excuse me, where they did xenomythology. It's clearly the room where they studied quantum mechanics. And it's now the room that is the observation room for the humpback whales. So the problem when you have a great set that stands out is that it becomes noticeable when you're reusing it again. I also have a question. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Was this an Easter egg too far for Trima to go that way, like she's pregnant? Was it enough that you had the descendants of George and Gracie here? Did we need to do Gracie is pregnant again? I personally think it was one egg too far. Well, then very frustrated people arrive, and Sidal is not happy that Trima is spending time with Caleb, and Nala's not happy that Caleb has broken curfew, and, he goes to say, oh, look, we found Gojfa. She's like, I don't want to hear it. Yeah, I mean, I guess they are out of bounds and they're breaking curfew, but is that not exactly, do they not want a cultural exchange? It kind of feels like we're being forced into a corner here. There is now a banquet to celebrate the Beta Z delegation. I have in my notes here that Eddie laughed so hard when he saw the Doctor and guest star soprano Jamie Groot singing from Mozart's The Magic Flute, that he laughed so hard that apparently he nearly woke Ralph. And I think that's just great. Yes, Jamie Groot, famous soprano singer, is here playing one of, now we only know them as Natalia's species. We don't have a name for this species yet, but we saw them in Star Trek Beyond, we saw them on a playing card in season 4 of Discovery, and we also saw one in section 31 as well. I love the spiral-headed design. Also, these two can sing. We get a moment where Nala is speaking to Vance and she says, am I a masochist or an optimist? And he goes, well, you haven't murdered Caleb yet, so I'm going to call that a win. Up. Sidal arrives in all of his pompous glory, and they're speaking with Vance and Nala, and they say, yes, we're about to break new ground on Federation HQ in Paris. To which Sidal kind of goes like, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But if you look at the background, we cut then to Laura Thok and Reno, and Reno's there, you know what, he's uppity, and I don't care if he can hear this, and it's very Reno, and it's an up. I love then that Thok just goes, our best, their best, to the death. And Reno goes, what is wrong with you? No, really, what is wrong with you? I love these little gags. Sam's not in this episode much, but it seems like she is there just long enough to be bullied by more people. Leave my Sam alone. She comes around and she's speaking to Genesis and tells her, like, yeah, people are saying not very nice things. But although there's not much of the two of these characters in this episode, I do like the fact that Genesis and Sam do seem to be getting along very well, which I'm happy about. There's a moment here where Caleb and Trima are obviously heavily flirting, and they then excuse themselves out of the room. Also, nice moment where Occam turns around and basically is just like, hey little sis, totally support you, and away she goes. It's cool, I like it. Genesis kind of gives them a look as they go, and my first thought was like, oh, are we doing love triangle? I was in a position to interview Bella Shepherd and Zoe Steiner there last week. Thank you again, SFX and Paramount, for that opportunity. But one of the things I said to them was like, one of the things that I really like about this show, they don't pit the women against each other. We're not doing that, you know, we're just gonna have them fighting and it's gonna be love triangle. I guess tiny little spoiler. They don't do that. The look that was given here, it's like, oh Lord, is that what we're doing? That's not the direction that we go in, and I could not be happier, because I would be frustrated with that because it's so overdone. But we don't have that at all. Trima and Caleb go outside, and Caleb, in this conversation, reveals that he was looking for his mum. And Trima then goes, well, why didn't you just tell me that? You know, why weren't you, I was honest with you, why weren't you honest with me? Were you just using me to get access to our star charts? Why didn't you tell me? And he goes, well, I only knew you for 5 minutes. And they both kind of make good points here. But I have to say, damn, we are skyrocketing through a relationship, and now we're having our first fight, and it does feel lover's tiff, bit forced. Why are we doing this already? And I don't know, and then he's quite nasty to her as well, which I don't like. He's like, oh, go back to your valets, and she leaves. And I'm on her side here. She's right to just walk away. It's a little bit like, oh, good, we've been here for 5 seconds. All right, okay, grand. And it's kind of too fast all the way through, so that when Trima goes back in again, you're like, well, Caleb, yeah, you were an idiot, but everyone overreacted here. Before she goes, we do learn an important thing, that she's got a little device on her neck, because she is a little bit different from other betazoids, that she's a bit more, her abilities are a bit more intense, and she can hurt people. We're kind of like, have we like a bit of a Jean Grey situation going on here? I'm interested to see how this one plays out. I had a big moment of an up here. Nala thanks the waiting staff. I have been a waiter for quite a while in the past. I have been to many places where people don't look at the waiting staff, they don't thank the waiting staff, they don't acknowledge the waiting staff. And quite frankly, stop. Say thank you to your waiter and serving staff, because they're people. So yeah, I just loved, it was the slight inclusion, but you don't see a lot of other people doing that. Thanks, Nala. On behalf of serving staff, I appreciate that. Makes me think of a quote. Aunt Lucy always says that if we are kind and polite, the world will be right. Sadal is grilling Nala on Caleb. He's really taken a dislike to the young Mir and says, you know, all other potential students of the academy are forced to undergo evaluation and exams, to which Nala says, well, he, you know, aced the exams in the back of a shuttle on the way to Starfleet Academy. This guy is exceptional. He knows what he's doing. To which Sadal counters with, oh, so he just gets special treatment then, does he? Nala does a tiny, I think she oversteps a little bit when she says betazoids are defining themselves with their walls. Sadal takes this as a, right, I'm leaving, turns on his heel, that's the end of that. But as Vance says, he came here to say no. He came here with his unreasonable demands, looking for a reason to say, well, I tried, but they were just so unreasonable that I couldn't possibly do that. And everyone knows what's going on, and it's frustrating because it's so obvious. But yeah, that's how a lot of nonsense diplomacy goes. Nala goes to Caleb's quarters. He's there, well, first of all, topless. Mother of God, Sandro Rosta. That's a lot of weightlifting. Anyway, so she walks in and says, oh, you still haven't made your bed. Call back to the start of the episode. And they talk, and she makes a point of going, when I found you, what I really wanted was that little 6-year-old kid to be okay. But you're not that kid anymore. And she's starting to come around to the fact that Caleb is perhaps quite immature, but he is an adult. They're starting to, I think, not that there was an icy barrier between them, but if there were, it would be starting to thaw here. Nala dropped something that, you know, when I knew your mum in the rehabilitation centre, she was studying physics, she was really good at it. I don't know, that feels like, I don't know, let's pay attention to that statement. I'm honest to God, as I sit here, I don't know if that's going to play out or anything, but it feels like, she was very into physics, was she? Is this something that will come back? They talk about building things, and Nala has a brainwave. And anyway, right, we're going back to that brainwave now. Caleb goes and speaks to Trima, and he apologizes to her. And right in front of all the delegation, it's a bit serious, but he explains that the Federation were the villain in his story, that they took his mother away. There's a great word he says, like, please, try and get your dad back to the table. If you won't do it for me, for the love of God, do it for Turner. And I like that. That's an up. Sometimes a discussion is what's needed to move things forward. And I think a lot of this episode encapsulates that. So when Sidal comes back to the negotiating table, this time he's speaking to Nala. And Nala goes, last night we discussed tradition. Basically, here's what we'll offer. The Federation headquarters will be on Beta Z if you rejoin the Federation. We will be there. Sidal removes his device so that he can use his own vocal cords to go, yes. Coming to the table in this way is an up, but overall, the diplomacy of this episode is our Latinum up of the week because it's so Star Trek. It is Star Trek to its core. This is how we solve our problems, not with a phaser, but with the negotiation table. And I love that in this episode. Two things. I feel like Caleb made a sort of throwaway comment about building things in his quarters, which tying back into the opening credits, this idea of growth together, rebuilding Starfleet Academy. Did Nala need Caleb to say that to come up with the idea of proposing we build Federation headquarters on Beta Z? I don't think so. I think that was a down. And I'm gonna get in trouble with my partner for this one because Dead Poet Society is one of his favorite films, but it's a bit, oh Captain, my Captain, at the end when they all stand up, isn't it? That was a down for me. We went slightly into the cheese. Down as in sit down. In a last exchange between Caleb and Nala, she says that the last we know is your mum was headed to the Ramoff sector 3 months ago. She gives this information to Caleb, keeping up her end of the bargain, and tosses either another Verulian fire fruit to him, or maybe this one is an apple, because he takes a bite and doesn't seem to react. So either this is Caleb going, I can switch off my nerve endings, or just trust that sometimes I will look after you. It's a nice little scene, I like it. He goes back to his quarters, and Occam has moved in. Trima's brother. I realize Chris didn't like this scene at all. I did because he suggests let's build a fort. Fort gets an up from me. But yeah, he's a bit extreme. And Darum has all of these trophies. Occam only has mental trophies. The ones he gives himself, like the Got Out of Bed on Time award. I am really called out in this episode. Like seriously, what are you doing? What are you doing to me? We find out two things in quick succession. One is that apparently Occam has described himself as Darum and Caleb's third. Okay. And Trima is also staying behind, but she chose the War College. She didn't choose Starfleet Academy. Interesting, because we were wondering in the previous episode, well, we know Zoe Steiner is going to be part of the main cast, but the preview episode or images hadn't shown her in uniform. Nice way of kind of surprising us there. So she will be around, but not at the Academy. Nicely done. Nicely done. A little bit of background dialogue. You hear that Darum had to fight a man with 3 legs on Keonia for that thing, with 2 arms. So we were thinking, oh, did a Nadosian just lose a hand in a fight? Whilst that's happening, Caleb starts to make his bed. Darum goes over and helps him. And I like it. This is what I want. As Occam says, bros helping bros. I like the way this episode ends. So would you join me, please, at Citation Observations? Full disclosure, it was really starting to get quite warm in this room. Okay, so we are going to go through it now. There's references to things like the tapestry that they are a part of. Tapestry obviously calling back to one of my favorite episodes of The Next Generation. We see Orions, we see Ferengi. So that updated Ferengi for the Discovery era, which actually, funny enough, I say updated, looks like it's closer to Andy Probert's original design for the Ferengi all the way back from 1987. We see that Charon cadet as well, and the black uniformed cadets. And, keep an eye out for a few of those. We have xenobiology, which, who was a famous xenobiologist? Michael Burnham. More panning shots, and we see a Romulan cadet at the War Academy, and also one who appears to be Valian, going back to the Apple, that original series episode that guest starred the late David Soul, where they were all worshipping a big rock in the shape of a kind of a snake's head, and everything could kill you. Wasn't it good fun? Thok says, "My father taught me that victory is life," the famous phrase from the Jem'Hadar, and my mother taught me that today is a good day to die, the famous quote from The Way of the Warrior as well, from the Klingons. Boothby Memorial Park. I love that. I love that. Nala literally says out loud, "Boldly go where no one has gone before." We see a Schlurm cadet, this race that was introduced in Discovery. Fireworks were in the shape of a delta. The closing notes of the opening theme reminding us of Ilea's theme from the motion picture. We have a Breekar coming straight over from both Beta Canon and also Star Trek Prodigy, which makes me very happy. We see advertisement for the Association of Cardassian Cadets. Behind Sam on that console, you see a quote, "It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life." That was said by Picard to Data in the episode Peak Performance of The Next Generation. We see our Kelpian, who hopefully isn't called Sukal. The exocomp in the turbolift. First of all, the exocomp itself is an Easter egg from the Quality of Life episode of The Next Generation, but also, did you hear that exocomp was speaking as they move? Okay, and then the last time, wow. I'm getting kind of Peanut Hamper vibes from that. Well, this one is called Almond Basket and is voiced by Heather Donahue, who voiced Peanut Hamper in Star Trek Lower Decks. That is a nice little cameo right there. And also in that turbolift, if you look behind Laura Thok, there's 3 more quotes on that wall. The first one, "There are 3 things to remember about being a starship captain. Keep your shirt tucked in, go down with the ship, and never abandon a member of your crew." Spoken by Captain Janeway to Naomi Wildman in Dark Frontier. Next one, "Running may help for a little while, but sooner or later the pain catches up with you. And the only way to get rid of it is to stand your ground and face it." Spoken by Sisko to Worf in The Way of the Warrior. The last one then, "Giving up our values in the name of security is to lose the battle in advance." Spoken by Pike to Admiral Katrina Cornwell in Project Daedalus. Reminder that the Federation HQ has always been in Paris before this. Keep an eye on those records in Aki's ready room. He's a big fan of the Grateful Dead, apparently. Specialist Krebs needs to return to the science lab because his Talaxian furfly has come out of hibernation. Commander Kelrek, getting real John Harriman vibes there. Reno says the words "time's arrow," which of course making us think of Samuel Clemens. "I do declare." The Fibonacci sequence has been mentioned in Star Trek several times before. Look, there's a Borg! And as I mentioned, Sedal seems to be very evocative of Riga from Loud as a Whisper from TNG's 2nd season. TNG, so woke. We are walking down through Kirk Pavilion. There's an Oberth class model in Nala's quarters. As I say, we're going to keep updating the quarters every time we get a clearer shot of those shelves as well. The Star Trek theme being played as he puts the food in the bin. Rakjagino is now being served in the Repla Cafe, which made me smile. He also says, "Kapla," thank you, Stephen Colbert. These references to Gideon, as I say, could be something, could be nothing. We see on those banners the Mugatu and the Laplings. The Mugatu from Private Little War from the original series. And there was a Lapling in Kivas Fajo's collection in the Most Toys episode of The Next Generation as well. Lot of references to humpback whales going on. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, you're looking well. As I say now, she's pregnant, possibly 1 egg too far. Talking about the first daughter of the first House of Beta Z, so we're thinking of, Loxana always introducing herself as Loxana Troy, daughter of the 5th House of Beta Z, heir to the sacred rings and the holy chalice of Reeks. I like it. We go to stellar cartography, we see things like Axanar, Tellar, Terra Nova, Alpha Centauri, Capella. Beta Z had naked weddings. Yes, it does. Now, time for episode 2 of Wall Watch.
Picard, Jodie, everybody's dead show.
Anne Noonien Singh, Noga Landau, Gina Violo, Ariam Hikaru Sulu, Robin Leffler, Tuvok, Worf, Connor Rossa, Ash Tyler, Erika Hernandez, Robert April, Will Decker, John Harriman, Carol Freeman, Cristobal Rios, Liam Shaw, Hugh Colbert, Anna Ramsey, Marie Patel, Clark Terrell, Sylvia LaForge, Twyla Scott, Jadzia Dax, Giovanna Tendi, Dr. Gillian Taylor, Rock Talk, Elizabeth Shelby, Rua Brackett, Admiral Tilara, Aaron Byers, Geordie LaForge, Miles O'Brien, Rachel Garrett, Admiral Jean-Luc Picard. And as we say, the more clear images we get of the wall, the more wall watch we will bring to you. Before I leave that topic, we know now that Zero the Third and Rock Talk are both on this memorial wall. Last week, when Sam was talking to the Doctor, she said you were a mentor to Dal, Murph, and Captain Gwendola. He turns around looking stricken. Is there a reason they're not on the memorial wall? We see the building of Alcatraz looking okay after it was absolutely destroyed in the Kelvin universe by the crash of the USS Vengeance. Humpback whales, we see a little bit of the Golden Gate Bridge there as well. Natalia's species there. There's quotes as well behind the two singers. I think, therefore I am, by Descartes, and there is no easy way from the earth to the stars, by the Roman philosopher Seneca. Nala references the Opal Sea, which we know is on Beta Z. Coming up toward the end, it sounds like Darum wrestled on a Dosian to get that trophy. What I'm also getting is, we're getting Jack Crusher vibes from Caleb here. So he's around, but he's being pulled away by the search for his mum, in the same way that Jack gets pulled away by the search for the Borg Queen, although he doesn't know it's the Borg Queen. One of my predictions, if you like, for this season is, I wonder if we're going to get a moment where Caleb leaves the academy because he gets a tip-off for his mum. So I'm calling that now in episode 2, and let's see if that comes to pass. We will see. Before I let you go and escape back to your lives of happiness and freedom, there was something myself and Chris had a bit of a head scratcher about. And it's about the physical locations in San Francisco for these buildings. So you have Starfleet Academy, which is parked as you look at the bridge with the rocky outcropping. As I'm looking at it here, you have Academy here. So this is probably, sorry, this is like reversed for you. That way. Rocky outcropping, Academy here, bridge there, right? When we go back to things like The Next Generation and, you know, where with the Waterworks version of the Academy, it looks like that does more or less line up. But then you have Starfleet archives there in Star Trek Picard. What you also have then is the tree that Tilly was such a big fan of, that was present when Discovery arrived at Earth in People of Earth in Discovery's 3rd season, that she was delighted that almost 1,000 years later that tree was still there. Well, that tree was absolutely not there in Picard, for example. And we were there trying to go, well, hang on, what if it's there? If it's that side, it's that side, but then hang on, that had tall buildings there. And remember, Tilly would have remembered a tree from before, a century before the events of Picard. We got to the conclusion that in some of these shows, the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. And I don't think that when they were creating Picard and Starfleet archives and everything there, that they had the aesthetic of Discovery in mind, or vice versa. Discovery didn't have the aesthetic of Picard in mind, and that's left us with a tiny little bit of kind of continuity whoopsies as we go along. But not that there's ever been a continuity whoopsie between different iterations of Star Trek. But for now, that's everything for this episode. Thank you very much. It's been 2 episodes in 1 week. It's been, there's been a lot to do, but it's been fun. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Remember, we will be back next week with episode 3 of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, all of the ups and downs. Please make sure you're following us, the various socials. We're at TrekCulture or at TrekCultureYT on Instagram. I am at Sean Ferry. Chris is at EditChrisEdit. And Eddie is at e.d.r. Eddie, it's the most complicated handle, but it's so good. Eddie, are you okay? And he's on Instagram, so he's going to be very kind and put that in the description of this episode because I've just butchered it. You are all wonderful. You are brilliant. Make sure that you come back to us again next week. I really hope you're enjoying the show. Don't mind the people who haven't seen it, who are saying it's awful. It always happens with new shows, all right? It always happens. So look, just Let's everyone just give it a chance, let's enjoy it, and let's have some fun. It's Star Trek after all. Live long and prosper, everyone. I will see you next week. Thanks very much.